Growing up as the second daughter in the Wilson family meant living in Jessica's shadow. She was 5 years older and, according to our parents, she was perfect in every way. I learned this lesson early, and it was reinforced daily in ways both big and small. When I was 6, I got an A on my math test and ran home excited to show Mom and Dad. They were in the kitchen fawning over Jessica's new dance routine. "That's nice, honey," Mom said without even looking at my paper, "but look at your sister's pirouette." I stood there holding my test until the paper went limp in my hands, then quietly headed to my room. The pattern never changed. Jessica got new clothes from the mall while I got her hand-me-downs. When she wanted a phone at 12, they bought her the latest iPhone. When I turned 12, I got Jessica's old flip phone and was told to be grateful. "Your sister is going places," Dad would say whenever I dared to complain. "She needs these things for her future." Apparently my future didn't need much investment. Our paternal grandparents, who lived in a fancy part of town with their swimming pool and perfectly manicured lawn, were cut from the same cloth. Every time we visited, Grandma Margaret would greet Jessica with enormous hugs and excited squeals while I got a distracted pat on the head. "Oh, Robin," she'd say like she'd just remembered I existed, "you've grown." But Christmas, when I was 8, really drove it home. Jessica unwrapped a brand new laptop for her schoolwork. I got a pack of notebooks and some pencils. "We're being practical," Grandpa Richard explained with that condescending smile of his. "This is more your speed, isn't it?" But I had my own sanctuary, my mother's parents' house. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George lived in a modest ranch-style home on the other side of town. There's something magical happened. I was treated like I mattered. They'd actually listen when I talked. They hung my artwork on their fridge right next to Jessica's. They remembered my favorite foods and made them when I visited. Jessica hated going there. "It's so boring," she'd complain. "They don't even have a pool, and Grandma Eleanor never lets me choose what we watch on TV." So she stopped visiting, which meant I got them all to myself. While our parents were busy shuttling Jessica to her endless parade of activities, ballet 1 month, horse riding the next, then violin lessons she'd quit after 3 weeks, I spent my afternoons at Eleanor and George's. They taught me to bake cookies, helped me with homework, and never once compared me to my sister. I was 10 when my parents delivered the final verdict on my worth to the family. It came during what they called a family meeting, though it felt more like a trial where the sentence had been decided long before the proceedings began. It was a Sunday afternoon in October. All 6 adults arranged themselves around our living room, Mom and Dad standing by the fireplace, both sets of grandparents on the matching sofas, and Jessica and me perched on chairs brought in from the dining room. The atmosphere was heavy with manufactured importance. "We need to discuss something serious," Dad began, his hands clasped behind his back like a businessman about to announce layoffs. "As you know, college education isn't getting any cheaper." I watched Jessica straighten up in her chair, smoothing her perfect blonde hair. At 15, she was already practicing her future college student pose. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, already knowing where this was going. "We've been saving since the girls were born," Mom continued, her eyes drifting to Jessica. "But with the current economy, well, we can only afford to send one of them to college." The pause that followed wasn't really a pause at all. It was just for dramatic effect, like when TV shows pretend there's suspense before announcing the obvious winner. "Jessica will be starting college in 3 years," Dad announced. "She has shown remarkable talent in so many areas. It's important we support her potential." Then he turned to me, his expression a mix of dismissal and fake sympathy. "Robin, honey, you're different. You're more suited for practical work. You don't really need college." Grandma Margaret, Dad's mother, nodded enthusiastically. "Jessica is so gifted," she gushed. "Just last week her dance teacher said she had natural grace. She needs the best education possible." I sat there feeling smaller with each word, not talented enough, not worth investing in, not special like Jessica. The familiar message, now just officially stamped and sealed. But then something unexpected happened. Grandpa George stood up, his face red with anger. "This is absolutely unfair," he declared. "How dare you write off a 10-year-old child like this?" "George," my father started, but Grandma Eleanor cut him off. "If you won't support both your daughters equally," she said, her voice sharp as ice, "then we'll pay for Robin's college ourselves." I watched as my maternal grandparents stood up together, a united front. "Robin will have her chance at college," Grandma Eleanor announced. "We'll make sure of that." Then they walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind. Later that night, I was heading to the kitchen for water when I heard my parents talking in their bedroom. The heating vent carried their words clearly up to the hallway. "Mother's being ridiculous," Mom was saying. "Robin's not college material. She can barely keep up in regular classes. They should give us that money for Jessica's education instead. It would be wasted on Robin. She's just not bright enough." Dad agreed. "I don't know why they're pushing this." I stood there in the dark hallway, their words washing over me like a familiar bit of rain, but somehow it didn't hurt as much as it should have, maybe because I'd heard it all before, or maybe because I could still hear Grandma Eleanor's fierce promise echoing in my head. The years passed and Jessica went off to an expensive private college while I finished high school. My parents never missed a chance to brag about their perfect daughter, constantly updating everyone about Jessica's amazing college experience, her excellent grades, and her bright future ahead. I focused on my own studies, spending most of my time at Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George's house. Their quiet support meant more than all my parents' loud praise of Jessica ever could. Then came the day that shattered my parents' perfect vision of their golden child. I was in my senior year when Jessica came home from college fresh from graduation. I was doing homework at the kitchen table when she burst through the front door, mascara running down her face. "Mom, Dad," she sobbed, "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom dropped her coffee mug. Dark liquid spread across the kitchen floor. "Who's the father?" Dad finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jessica's next words sent Mom collapsing into a chair. "I don't know for sure." I watched my parents' faces as their perfect world crumbled, but it took them less than 5 minutes to reconstruct it. "Oh, sweetie," Mom rushed to hug Jessica. "It's not your fault. These things happen. We'll help you raise the baby." Dad added quickly, "You can stay here with us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I said from my spot at the table. "She parties her way through college, gets pregnant, doesn't even know who the father is, and you're still making excuses for her?" "Robin," Mom snapped. "No, listen," I continued, years of frustration finally boiling over. "This is what happens when you spoil someone their entire life, when you never make them face consequences, when you—" "How dare you," Dad thundered. "Your sister is going through a difficult time, and you're being cruel." Jessica burst into fresh tears and Mom wrapped her arms around her protectively. "Get out," she screamed at me, "you heartless little—" I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ran upstairs, threw some clothes into a bag, and walked out. Behind me I could hear them consoling Jessica, telling her everything would be okay, that none of this was her fault. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George took me in without question. I finished my senior year living with them, focusing on my college applications. My parents didn't call, didn't check on me, didn't even show up at my graduation. But I had my real family there, my grandparents beaming with pride as I accepted my diploma. That fall I left for college in another city, my tuition paid by my grandparents just as they'd promised years ago. I heard through the grapevine that Jessica had given birth to a daughter and was living with our parents. They were probably still making excuses for her, still treating her like their perfect child who could do no wrong. Life had a funny way of working out. While Jessica's brilliant future had crumbled, I was thriving. After graduating college with honors, I landed a job at a top consulting firm in the city. Within 6 years, I had worked my way up to senior consultant, earned respect from my colleagues, and even managed to buy my own apartment. My routine was comfortable, challenging work during the week, weekend brunches with friends, and regular video calls with Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George. They were proud of everything I'd accomplished, and that was all the family validation I needed. Then on a regular Tuesday morning my phone rang. I almost dropped my coffee when I saw Mom flash across the screen a number I hadn't seen in almost a decade. "Robin," her voice sounded older, tired, "we need your help." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my office, still trying to process what she'd told me. Jessica had run away again, this time with some guy she'd met at a bar. She'd left behind her 9-year-old daughter, the niece I'd never met. "Please come home," Mom had pleaded. "We need to discuss this in person." That's how I found myself driving back to my childhood home that evening. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling around the windows. Mom and Dad had aged more than I expected, Dad's hair completely gray now, Mom's face lined with worry. They led me to the living room, the same room where they'd once declared I wasn't worth sending to college. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Jessica's been unstable," Dad began, staring at his hands. "She never kept a job for more than a few months. Different men, different apartments. She always ended up back here." Mom wiped her eyes. "We tried to help, paid her debts, watched Lucy while she worked, or said she was working. But last week she met this man, said he was taking her to California to become an actress." She laughed bitterly. She packed a bag and left. Didn't even say goodbye to Lucy. "We're drowning in debt," Dad admitted, his voice cracking, credit cards, personal loans, all to keep Jessica afloat. And now, I waited for the rest, watching them squirm uncomfortably on the couch that had faded from cream to dingy beige. "We want you to take Lucy," Mom finally said. "Adopt her, actually. You're stable, successful. You could give her a good life. We're too old for this. We can't start over with a child." I sat there stunned. These people who had written me off as worthless, who hadn't even come to my graduation, were now asking me to take responsibility for a child I'd never met, a child they'd helped raise for 9 years while enabling Jessica's chaos. After my parents went to bed that night, I sat in the kitchen with Lucy. She was nothing like I expected, nothing like Jessica. While my sister had been loud and demanding, Lucy was quiet and thoughtful with serious brown eyes and a gentle smile. "Do you like to read?" I asked, noticing a worn copy of Harry Potter on the kitchen counter. "I love it," she said softly, "but Grandma says I read too much. She says I should do something useful instead." Over cups of hot chocolate, Lucy slowly opened up. She told me about her life with my parents, how Grandma sighed heavily whenever she had to make Lucy dinner, how Grandpa complained about the cost of her school supplies. They didn't hit her or starve her, but their resentment was palpable in every interaction. I spent the next week taking time off work, getting to know my niece. We went for ice cream, visited the local library, and talked about everything and nothing. Lucy was smart, kind, and remarkably resilient despite everything she'd been through. She showed me her straight-A report cards that no one had ever celebrated, her artwork that never made it to the fridge. The decision to adopt her wasn't easy. I had a career, a life I'd built carefully from scratch. But watching Lucy try to make herself smaller, quieter, less troublesome, just as I had at her age, made the choice clear. The legal process was exhausting. For months, I gathered documentation, my financial records, character references, proof of stable employment. Jessica didn't contest the termination of her parental rights, didn't even show up for the hearing. Finally, after what felt like endless paperwork and interviews, I became Lucy's legal guardian. The day we packed up her room at my parents' house, they barely looked up from their TV show. "Don't forget to forward her school records," was all Mom said. Lucy flourished in our new life together. She decorated her room in our apartment with fairy lights and bookshelves, joined the school's debate team, made friends who came over for movie nights and study sessions. We developed our own little rituals: Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks in the park, marathon sessions of board games. Monthly visits to Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George became a highlight for both of us. They doted on Lucy the way loving grandparents should, proudly displaying her artwork and report cards, remembering her favorite foods, listening to her stories with genuine interest. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Lucy turned 14, growing into a confident, compassionate teenager who consistently made the honor roll. My parents never called to check on her, never sent birthday cards, never asked how she was doing. But Lucy didn't seem to mind. She had found her real family. The phone call from my parents came on a Saturday morning. "We'd like you and Lucy to come visit," Mom said, her voice suspiciously cheerful. "We miss her." After 5 years of silence, their sudden interest set off alarm bells, but I decided to go. Lucy deserved to make her own choices about family relationships, and I didn't want to be the one standing in her way. The moment we walked through their front door, I understood why they'd called. Jessica was there, sitting on the couch like she'd never left. "Lucy," she cried, jumping up and rushing toward my niece. "Oh, baby, I've missed you so much." I watched Lucy's face carefully. She stood frozen, emotions flickering across her features. Hope, fear, confusion, longing. Jessica wrapped her in a tearful embrace, while our parents looked on approvingly. "I've changed," Jessica announced, wiping her eyes. "I've realized what's important. I want my daughter back." The word "back" hit me like a slap, like Lucy was a borrowed sweater she'd finally decided to reclaim. "I'm living in Phoenix now," Jessica continued, "with Robert. He's got a great job, and we have a beautiful house. Lucy would love it there." "Do you have a job?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Jessica's smile faltered. "Well, not right now, but Robert makes enough for all of us." "And what happens if things don't work out with Robert?" I pressed. "What's your backup plan?" "Why are you being so negative?" Mom snapped. "Your sister is trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I laughed incredulously. The right thing would have been not abandoning her daughter for 5 years. The right thing would have been sending birthday cards, making phone calls, showing any interest at all in Lucy's life. "I made mistakes," Jessica wailed, "but she's my daughter." "Stop being selfish, Robin," Dad cut in. "You've done your part, but Lucy needs her real mother now. You can have your own children if you want to play mommy so badly." I stared at them, stunned by their cruelty. These people who had failed not one but 2 daughters, who had enabled Jessica's irresponsibility for decades, who had never once in 5 years asked how Lucy was doing in school or what her interests were. They thought they could just restart the cycle of dysfunction. "Lucy isn't a toy you can pass around," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She's a person who needs stability and real love, not empty promises." "Where were you when she had nightmares? When she was sick? When she won the school spelling bee? Where were any of you?" "You have no right." Jessica screamed. "She's my child." "A child you abandoned," I shot back. "A child you left with people who resented her existence. A child who deserved better than all of you." Lucy, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly grabbed my hand. "We're leaving," I announced, squeezing her hand reassuringly, "and don't you dare try to contact us." Jessica's call came exactly a week after our confrontation. When I saw her number, I almost didn't answer, but something told me to record the conversation, a habit I developed after years of dealing with difficult clients. "Hey sis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I've been thinking about our situation, and I think I have a solution that could work for everyone." "What situation?" "Lucy, of course. Look, I know you've gotten attached to her, and I know you make good money at your fancy job, so here's the deal. Give me $150,000 and I won't sue for custody." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Excuse me?" "It's really a win-win," Jessica continued casually as if she wasn't trying to sell her own child. "You get to keep Lucy, and I get enough money to start fresh." "You can afford it with your salary." "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice shaking. "You're trying to sell your daughter to me?" "Don't be so dramatic. I'm just being practical. You want Lucy, I need money. Simple business transaction." "She's your child, Jessica, not a used car." "Fine," she snapped, her sweet tone vanishing. "Have it your way. I'll sue for custody and you'll never see her again." "How's that for practical?" She hung up and I sat there clutching my phone, feeling sick to my stomach. The lawsuit came 3 days later. Jessica's new boyfriend had hired her a slick lawyer who specialized in family court. The initial filing painted Jessica as a reformed mother who had overcome hardship to create a stable home for her daughter, while portraying me as a manipulative aunt who had taken advantage of a temporary situation. In court, Jessica played her role perfectly, tears streaming down her face. She told the judge about her journey of personal growth and how she'd found stability with her new partner. She claimed I had alienated Lucy from her, that I was using her daughter to prove I was better than my sister. Our parents testified on her behalf, claiming they'd only asked me to take Lucy temporarily while Jessica got back on her feet. Dad even suggested I was emotionally manipulating Lucy to turn her against her mother. I sat there listening to their lies, watching them spin their web of deception. But I had come prepared. Your Honor, my lawyer said, I'd like to submit an audio recording into evidence. Jessica's face went pale as her voice filled the courtroom. Give me $150,000 and I won't sue for custody. You want Lucy, I need money. Simple business transaction. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's lawyer stammered, trying to object, but the damage was done. Our parents sat frozen in their seats, for once without excuses to make for their perfect daughter. Then Lucy stood up. At 14, she seemed suddenly older, more confident than I'd ever seen her. I want to stay with Robin, she said clearly. My mother abandoned me. Robin chose me. She's my real family. I watched Jessica's face crumple, not in genuine grief, but in the realization that she'd lost her leverage. Our parents couldn't meet anyone's eyes. And Lucy stood tall, finally free of the weight of her mother's shadow. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Not only did I retain full custody of Lucy, but Jessica was barred from any contact with her daughter. The judge called her attempt to sell custody morally reprehensible and a clear indication of unfitness as a parent. I watched Jessica crumble in her seat as the ruling was read. Her boyfriend, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, stood up and walked out without a word. Later I heard he'd left her the same day, disgusted by her attempt to sell her own child. My parents tried to catch us in the courthouse parking lot. Robin, please, Mom called out. We can work this out as a family. I turned to face them one last time. Family? You haven't been family to either of us in years. Lucy deserves better than what you did to me, what you let Jessica do to her. But where will Jessica go? Dad demanded. Robert left her. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course. Still worried about Jessica even now. Some things never change. Jessica moved back in with our parents, exactly where she'd started. The golden child still being coddled, still being excused, still failing to grow up. But this time her failures had cost her something irreplaceable. Life went on. Lucy threw herself into her studies with renewed energy, as if the weight of uncertainty had finally lifted from her shoulders. She joined the school's newspaper team, started taking photography classes, and began talking about wanting to study journalism in college. You know what's funny? She said one evening as we were making dinner together. For years I thought something was wrong with me because my mom kept leaving. But now I realize she was the one with the problem. She never knew how to love anyone but herself. I hugged her tight, amazed by her wisdom. You're the strongest person I know, kiddo. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George remained our constant support system. Sundays at their house became a sacred tradition. They proudly displayed Lucy's photography in their living room, bragged about her achievements to their friends, and saved newspaper clippings of every article she wrote for the school paper. You two saved each other, Grandma Eleanor told me one day while we watched Lucy showing Grandpa George how to use his new digital camera, just like George, and I tried to save you. She was right. In trying to give Lucy the childhood I never had, I'd found the family I'd always wanted, not the one I was born into, but the one we chose together. My parents still send occasional texts about Jessica's latest drama, but I delete them unread. Lucy hasn't heard from her mother since the court case, and she says she prefers it that way. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Last week, Lucy won first place in a statewide student journalism competition. As I watched her accept her award, I thought about that scared 9-year-old girl I'd met years ago and the confident teenager she'd become. I thought about cycles broken, wounds healed, and love freely given.